Good morning, everybody. Sorry about the technical hitch. It is with immense honor that I am able to introduce you to Sraddhalu Ranade this morning. Sraddhalu is a scientist, an educator, and a scholar based at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, southern India. He grew up in the care of the late Sri M.P. Pandit, from whom he received his training in the theory and practice of the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and Mother. As an excerpt of Sraddhalu's resume is available on the Congress website, and as I'd like to give Sraddhalu as much time to speak as possible, I humbly summarize the main points here. And I must say I took the points that I was most interested in this list. Sraddhalu is deeply involved in education, research, and teacher training programs. He's the author of the book, Introduction to Integral Education. He specializes in physics, mathematics, and computer science, but seamlessly integrates it into philosophical, metaphysical, and spiritual studies. Sraddhalu's been involved in research projects, including artificial intelligence based on neural networks. He's been deeply involved in software development and hardware design, television programming. Honestly, the list is very vast, very diverse. So he has a huge range of skills and interests. Sraddhalu travels all over the world, delivering lectures and workshops on integral yoga, integral education, management by consciousness, esoteric sciences, self-development, spiritual studies. And, I think that is really probably the unique thing about Sraddhalu is this ability to integrate science and spirituality. Many of you might have met Sraddhalu before at the EUY Congress in Zinel. He was the guest of honor in 2011, 2012 and 2014. Personally, I met Sraddhalu on my very first trip to India, and participating in his teaching is really largely what brings me back to India year after year. Being in Sraddhalu's presence really imbibes wisdom, peace, love, and joy, and I have no doubt that this will be felt by all the participants this morning. Please do put your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom, and if we have time at the end, we will take some questions. Thank you very much, Sraddhalu. You're very welcome.
Thank you for your beautiful introduction. And greetings to everybody who's assembled today. And although we are meeting on a virtual space, separated by technology, we are united in a single purpose, and that is yoga. Yoga, not merely as a practice of physical postures, but as an entire lifestyle, as an entire life-changing tradition, knowledge system, and experiential power that has been developed over many thousands of years, transmitted by the rishis to humanity, which is intended to assist humanity to find liberation from all its limitations. And although in our daily form of practice of yoga, or at least as most of you are as teachers of yoga, you will find most students are coming to you for health reasons or for some semi-psychological interests. The fact is, through those superficial interests, this power of the yoga tradition infiltrates everybody, changes them from within, because at the core of the whole intention of the yoga tradition and the yoga technology is the power to transform our humanity into divinity. Yoga was given to humanity for this purpose, and whether we are conscious of it or not, this power continues to affect. It was only a couple of years ago, I was in the United States, where in a meeting we had somebody who was working as an activist on the ground level for a certain, let's say, community that was suffering a kind of an oppressive society. And he said, he described in the first meeting how he used to carry a gun with him. And as he moved from one block to the next, he lived in fear. He did not know what might happen the next day. Every interaction was governed by the backlog of fear, and so on. And we heard what he was doing. It was a very disturbing narrative. We met him again 1 year later, and this time we saw a completely different person. He was bright and he was glowing, he was smiling, he was happy and confident. And then he told us, I have let go of my gun. I don't need a gun. I walk with confidence in the most dangerous neighborhoods and help people get out of their problems. And so everybody was waiting to hear what is the magic which has done this. And then he shared the secret. He said, a year ago, I joined a yoga class. And although I went for health reasons, at the end of a few months, I found everything changing. My mind became more calm, my heart became more clear, and I began to feel greater compassion, greater self-confidence, greater effectivity in my work. Everything changed. The man had fundamentally been changed by a practice which he does not even realize how it works. This is the power of yoga. But what I want to bring to our attention here is the context of the present situation, the theme which has been set for this year's gathering. And the theme is yoga and the social reality, and particularly in the context of the pandemic. We have to realize that the pandemic offers us not only an opportunity, equally a great danger, but much more so, a great responsibility. And I'm going to touch upon each of these. First, starting with the aspect of danger. What the pandemic did when it first appeared, it spread fear. Now, we are all used to fear because we have our own fears, we have our own uncertainties in daily life. But what the pandemic did was, it brought that fear on a mass scale. And again, we can say that's not uncommon. Whenever there are wars, whenever there are social conflicts, there is a mass scale of fear and uncertainty. But what is unique in the history of the earth, at least as far as we know, is that this fear and uncertainty was spread over the entire earth. No country was left untouched. Some more, some less, but at the end of the day, every human being is filled with that fear and uncertainty, which is hammered into you by the media every single day. And whether you like it or not, it's pushed inside you until it pops up as your own. This in itself might be a passing affair, except that combined with it was isolation. So first there was a physical isolation, which then led to a psychological isolation. And the result of that is subjective, but all the more powerful. Because when you live in your own little bubble of ideas and emotions, after a while your emotions start festering. Your thoughts begin to revolve around little petty matters and repetitively until those petty matters become exaggerated and become a crisis. And before you know it, you've been pulled into a neurosis, which can very quickly become a psychosis. I've heard recently a medical doctor who's also a hypnotherapist describing in detail how the entire process of the lockdown and isolation was following the classic process of a hypnotic induction. But with the difference that in a normal hypnosis, it's guided with a certain purpose. Here it was just imposed blindly, chaotically, and then removed blindly, chaotically, put back, and the uncertainty of it being put back and removed repeatedly leaves society in a chaotic and confused condition. So one of the results of all this will be increasing confusion everywhere, as you can see in some places of the world, riots and all kinds of strange things which you would not have expected. The frustration of people being confined bursts out in a chaotic way. Now, all of this we can say is not by chance. There's a design, and whether it is a human design or a more, let's say, abstract energy, an asuric energy that wants to impose on humanity something negative, the fact is there is a design behind it, and it's been designed to push back evolution, to prevent the forward movement. So this is the danger aspect. But it is equally an opportunity. As we see today, we're connecting across the world in a way that would not have been possible. Had this pandemic happened 20 years ago, there was not the facility of the internet to bring us together. It would have been far worse. It has come just at the right time when all over the world a sufficient infrastructure has been built up that allows us to connect in spite of all this. And the result is because we connect with a deeper, more intense sense of purpose, precisely from the suffocation of isolation, we connect more deeply. Not everybody has the same experience, but at least we try to connect more deeply. We feel the bond across the boundaries of space and time. There are those who will participate in this session tomorrow and day after, and maybe a year from now and 20 years from now, who may feel as connected to us as we feel right now in this moment. So the transcendence of space and time boundaries is one of the positive opportunities, let's say. But everybody is not yet equipped to take advantage of the opportunity. And that's where we come to the aspect of responsibility that we have. Who are the people who can be put under hypnosis and not be swayed by the hypnotic induction, but maintain their poise of mastery and even neutralize or break out of the hypnosis or use it to a positive end? The people who are able to enter consciously into the same states that hypnosis takes you into are the ones who can do this. In other words, people who are used to deeper practices of meditation. Hypnosis only goes in a shallow depth. Deep meditation takes us far deeper to the ranges that are spiritual, to your in closeness to the soul, which hypnosis cannot do. But those who have had some practice of that inward movement, they will find here is such a beautiful opportunity of isolation to go within, to open to inner and higher possibilities of consciousness, to deepen your spiritual practices, and what a wonderful opportunity, you will say. But everybody in the world is not capable of that, is not prepared for that. And that's where our responsibility comes as practitioners as well as teachers of the yoga tradition. So I want to elaborate a little bit on this. The key, the whole purpose of the yoga technology is to bring us to self-mastery. Now, there are two kinds of self-mastery. There's the kind of self-mastery that a gymnast will have when they're preparing for the Olympic gymnastics. And yes, they do use yoga techniques for that purpose. And it allows them to stand in perfect stillness and concentration when around them there's a crowd of 10,000 people screaming and shouting to distract them. And they can remain in complete concentration and move into a movement that is not guided by a personal struggling, hampering, confused effort, but a smooth laminar flow of an inspiration that does it rather than you doing it. There is even the training, which is a very yogic training of removing yourself from the effort to allow the intuition and inspiration to do, and you become transparent. All this is part of Olympic gymnastic training, by the way. But this technology is not just that kind of superficial self-mastery. That's a great thing already. But this technology allows us for a self-mastery based on the true sense of I, which is the soul, the self. The individualized aspect of the self, which we may call our personal soul, and then the self itself, which is universal and even cosmic and even transcends space and time, which is also us, of which a special projection here at the center of our being is what we call the personal soul or I. To put ourselves in relation to that center and to make that the center of our self-mastery. This is the goal of yoga. Now, even if we take 1/100th of this, the practical result in our life is so enormous. Practically, it means we have at least the capacity of a basic mastery of thought, basic control of our emotions and even our body, and sometimes more than just basic, sometimes quite extraordinary, as you have seen in some of the Hatha Yogis. Swami Rama, for example, is recorded in the laboratory of slowing down his heartbeat, speeding up his heartbeat, even stopping his heartbeat for a duration of a minute or so. And then in one of the experiments, which I saw the documentation, he puts his hand out and they're measuring the temperature on his fingers, and he consciously wills the temperature of one finger to increase, and at the same time in another part of the palm wills the temperature to drop. At the same time, while one part heats up, another part drops. That kind of physical mastery is possible by this technology of yoga. So we understand here, yoga as a spiritual practice is not a spirituality that withdraws from life to go off into some otherworldly realization, as in many religions. Rather, it is a technology to be able to find our true self in order to liberate the totality of our being from its limitations, that we may be able to enjoy life and fulfill life without those limitations. This is the larger goal of yoga, to be able to realize the divine consciousness and to be able to then manifest it. In its manifestation, it takes 4 principal aspects, let's say. And of course, there's a whole infinite combinations of these 4. But the principal aspects we can broadly describe as the aspect of knowledge first. Our mind is so petty and small and limited and always hampered with doubt. Whatever knowledge we have always has something we do not know or something which is contrary to what we know, and we constantly need to extend and expand. That's why you see in science so many revolutions. Every now and then they will say, oh yes, all that we knew now is set aside because of this new discovery which changes everything. But now we have it. Of course, it's not it. There's a new discovery in which even all this will change. But they don't know it because they still think of reality in terms of finite pieces. But what yoga does is it opens your mind to the infinity of knowledge. There is in one of the Upanishads this very great statement. After the son of the rishi comes back with all the technical training that has been given to him formally in the schools of that time, which is already 10 times more than what we are taught today, his father Rishi asks him, well, did they teach you that by knowing which all is known? Oh, he says, is there such a thing? Teach me. And the Upanishad is teaching the rest of that. That there is a certain consciousness, and it is an infinite consciousness. By attaining to that consciousness and living in it, you have access to all knowledge simultaneously, and you can manifest that. So the aspect of divine knowledge is the first characteristic of this manifestation of divinity in life. And imagine how it will change life for us. Even if we approach this in a partial way, that we have access to an intuitive consciousness that allows us to know what we need to know at a given moment. We meet somebody, and as the person narrates an incident, we are able to feel and identify with the experience and acquire the character of that knowledge, just like that, as if we have lived that experience. Or detect where there is a mixture of falsehood or exaggeration and know exactly what happened. Or we turn to a problem of life, and as we concentrate, we know exactly what is necessary, and we are able to execute what we need at that moment because of the flow of the intuition that gives you not only the specifics of knowledge, but the skill of exercising that knowledge on demand. This is very much doable by us as we are today, with relatively very little effort. And just that already changes our whole life. It's a first small step towards the divinization of knowledge itself. But all the rest is waiting for us. It's calling us, waiting for that potential to be realized. And yoga is the technology which leads us to this. So this is the first aspect of the manifestation of the divine consciousness. The second aspect is the aspect of power. And this is something which needs to be understood more profoundly. Power is not just being in a position where you can exercise power. Power is a certain state of consciousness in which one flows and circumstances tend to align to express that which we need. And this again is seen spontaneously in the lives of some of the great sages, but it has meant to be as our normal state. And again, to whatever degree, is an aspect of the divine, therefore. Third is the aspect of harmony and love, and in which everything is seen to be as if an aspect of oneself. Everything is as if falls into place in perfect alignment with each other. And these are experiences which we have occasionally. We call it a state of flow, or the other words people use. Being in the zone is another term they use. But everything just happens, things fall into place. It's like a just-in-time production technology, except it's happening in life without any prior planning. In all relationships, in everything, things just fall into place as you flow. And many of us perhaps have consciously entered the flow state. But that's just the beginning of this poise of divine harmony. And when the divine harmony is realized more completely, you have the experience that everything in the universe is there, supporting you, assisting you in some way, and nothing is there which is contrary. Everything has its right place and a right use. There's nothing which is fundamentally erroneous. There's a fourth aspect, which is the aspect of perfection and beauty down to the tiniest detail. Look at the way the universe has been built by the divine manifestation. Everything is beautiful. Turn your telescope to the most abstract patch of sky and you'll see extraordinary beauty of the stars. Turn your telescope to any part of nature, whether a forest or an ocean or a river or a mountain, and it is beautiful, down to the tiniest detail. But the beauty is not a repetitive mechanical beauty. It is never repeated. The divine beauty has the character that it is not monotone. It is always unique and always beautiful. Such is the nature of the divine consciousness. And this is also meant to be manifested in our lives. Now, why am I dwelling on these? It is to show that the spirituality that the yoga leads us to is not a spirituality of withdrawal from life, but a fulfillment of life. These are all the things we are craving in our life, isn't it? We crave true knowledge. We crave true effectivity. We crave true harmony and love and beauty and affinities and friendships that are lasting, real. And we want to be one with all in some way. And this is what the yoga offers us. This is the nature of the divine consciousness to be realized here and now and in the body, in life. Why is this important? Because this is the future of humanity. This is what humanity has been seeking from the beginning, and this is what is the inevitable goal. That's why we are seeking it, somehow by an intuition, because somewhere we already are that which we are seeking. So we know it should be possible. You know, all of us in our teenage have this idea of true love. Somewhere, someone, true love. And so many romantic movies, books, plays have been written about true love, Romeo and Juliet. But have you ever seen true love? Have you ever seen it last? If you see the movie, The Titanic, some of you would have seen it. It was the first recreation of the Titanic ship, and then they made a romantic story into it. That movie became famous not because of the size of the ship, It became famous because they showed the awakening of a spark of true love between the hero and the heroine. And at the last end, when the ship sinks, the hero and the heroine are surviving, and one of them has to let go of the thing which is keeping them afloat. And the director says in an interview, we had a choice. Should we let the hero survive or should we let him die? And he says, we chose to let him die. And you have to understand why. If the hero had survived, they would have got married, true love would have gone. They would have quarreled, for sure. Because he died, that moment of true love became immortalized, became permanent, and it made the movie immortal. As you see in the story of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, or any number of immortal love stories, someone dies so that the moment of true love is made permanent. Why is that? Because somehow in the way we are made up, because we're still human, we're still half animal rather, we are unable to contain that true love, and yet we dream of it. Why? Because in the depth of our being, in the very essence of ourselves, in the soul, in the divinity that we are true love. We are the love that the divine shares with the whole universe. What's the relationship of the divine with the universe? When the universe pours out of his own creative energy, of his own creative conception, the only relationship is an embracement of oneness in love. And it is that love that fills the universe and acts as the soothing balm against all the pain and struggle of our evolutionary awakening. And it is that love which draws us back to awaken to the oneness of the divine consciousness. And it is that love that we already are in our soul because we are one with the divine already there. And so we seek to realize that in our life, and we fail because of the deep gap between what we are truly and what we are on the surface. And yoga is the technology which allows us to bridge that gap. That's why it's called yoga. It is union. It is uniting. It is joining of our surface with our deepest. It is joining our human to the divine. And so it is not only a joining. In the joining is the manifestation of the divinity that we are into the humanity that is still growing. And all this is important in the current context of the pandemic, because the pandemic is one of those opportunities, the transition points, where much good could come out or much harm could come out of it. We've touched briefly on some of the examples of that. But nobody out there in the world has the means to ensure the goodness over the harm. The scientists cannot help you. The psychotherapists cannot help you. They are themselves sick because of this condition. The engineers cannot help you. The lawyers cannot help you. The artists cannot help you. They can only express the current state of confusion. Who can help you? Those who have the tools for inner awareness and self-mastery. And that's you, as teachers, practitioners, and teachers of the yoga tradition. This knowledge, which is so precious, given to us by the rishis, preserved through so many millennia and developed and perfected. And although we may have a small part of it still, that small part is enough to be able to free us and help those around us. Not only to manage this condition of the pandemic, but to accelerate our evolution towards our divine potential, which all of us consciously or unconsciously are actually seeking. So I want to highlight two aspects of this transition. The negative and what we need to do in terms of the correction. One of the things you will see today all over the world is an attempt to impose a uniformity. And the pandemic has become a wonderful occasion to flatten everything. You will see in the model that for a long time the United Nations has been promoting, there is one World Bank, there is one health organization, there is one centralized legal system, there's one centralized whatever. And all these are being constructed as a superstructure to be imposed over nations, to obliterate national boundaries, to remove the boundaries, and to allow a free mixing of people. You're seeing some of the problems of what that has done in Europe, and even all over the world, a similar situation to different degrees. And somehow, on one level, we say, yes, it's true, we are all one humanity. Why boundaries? But on another level, we see you remove boundaries and you have chaos. How do we resolve this? And the insight of yoga helps us. You see, nature very carefully created isolated pockets first, isolated units to develop, and her focus was to develop individuality. We started first with developing each individual, and then the family unit, which became like a larger unit of individuality. And then from there, the clan unit, which you still see quite strong in certain cultures. And out of that, a larger tribe unit. After that, a larger social, more complex, and then multiple levels of complexity of social units. You are part of many structures, for example. And all of these have coalesced in the last, let's say, generally 200 years to form the nation unit. And the nation unit is one of those structures that nature has still not fully developed. It is still in development. You will see every nation structure has been built along certain boundaries of culture and civilization going back many thousands of years. But as a political unit, it's relatively new, maybe at best 100 or 200 years old. And so it's still in formation and not yet completed. And it's only when it's completed and a nation unit has become strong enough to stand by itself that it can relate in a healthy way with other nations. A premature opening of the boundaries and a mixing will create uniformity and will break the distinctive identity of cultures and civilizations and what they are meant to represent in human evolution. Sri Aurobindo points out that each civilization has played a critical role in developing, perfecting, and gifting to humanity a particular aspect or quality or power or some truth of life, of spirit. The Roman civilization, for example, and because in the context of Europe it has been so powerful as an influence, it created this whole culture of structure, organization, hierarchy, and so on. Take a problem, divide it hierarchically, and organize society. And not only their military was organized this way, their thoughts were organized this way, their strategies, their art, their philosophy, everything was structured in that way. And parallel to that, you find Greece, which is a very different focus, where the whole focus was beauty and elegance of thought and form. In the mental space, beautiful thoughts, form of thoughts. In the physical space, beauty of forms, as in architecture and in literature and so on. These have been the two primary influences which have molded today's Europe. And you have to actually go back 2,000 years to see what was created there, which was so valuable. But they have influenced the world, each in its own way to different degrees. The Hebrew civilization is characterized by this allegiance to the law, to certain structured beliefs, and to give oneself passionately to that belief. The 10 Commandments, for example, or the book to which you dedicate your life, and so on, which again represents a certain aspect, a certain partial truth. Or the Japanese civilization, which is primarily about beauty. Everything must express beauty, otherwise it's not worthy of existing. Whether it is your kitchen garden, whether it is the way you pour tea, whether it is the way you put on your clothes, whether it is the way you greet another, everything has to express beauty and elegance. And that culture has actually influenced the whole world again, in each in its own way. In the same way, the Indian civilization, he points out, has its special characteristic, which has been spirituality. But a spirituality which is life-embracing and life-transforming. And that's why India has such an important role to play in the world, and particularly the knowledge of yoga, which India preserved and which now has to grow for the world. Because this is the means by which that spirituality and life transforming technology has to spread. And all of you are representatives of the tradition of the rishis, whether you're conscious of it or not. You may think you're just teaching some basic asanas and pranayam for good health. Yes, that's the first step of entry. Through that, so much more is happening behind the scenes, even if you're not conscious of it. But if you're conscious of it, you can assist it and accelerate it. But all of this is to show the distinctness of cultures, and making uniform and mixing across borders is premature and unhealthy in the current situation. And that's why it has been more chaotic than good. I'm pointing to this because there's a tendency in the current phase to bring about this kind of uniformity which is destructive to individuality. And one of the signs of this is seen in the pandemic and the structure imposed on us because of the pandemic in the face mask. Do you know who I am? No, I don't know. All of us are faceless beings meeting faceless beings. We don't count. We are like bees, worker bees or worker ants. Individuality doesn't matter. Everyone is flattened to be equal. This tendency is extremely harmful and extremely dangerous and contrary to the spiritual purpose of evolution. Evolution wants each individual to fulfill their uniqueness and their potential, because it is through the individual growth that the collective growth takes place. The collectivity never moves forward. It is the individuals who move forward who then take the collective together. So the tendency to flatten out is one of the dangers we have to face, and we have to be conscious of this. And even if we begin to make that correction in ourselves, we will make a big difference. If we convey this in our own way to our students, it will make an even bigger difference. Recognize the importance of individual growth, individual awakening, individual freedom, therefore. No imposed uniformity. That is harmful, that is contrary to evolution. So the first thing we will highlight is the aspect of freedom and individuality. But at the same time, that individual freedom is not a chaotic freedom. It is in the context of a society. And in the society, each individual must have equally the same freedom to follow their own line of development. So the second principle becomes equality. And these two have to go hand in hand, but except they seem to be contrary to each other. If you develop one, the other tends to be suppressed. Interesting. So how do you correct for this? If you see in the way it has worked out in current modern circumstances, the two truths of liberty and equality have been as if exaggerated in two different structures. The socialist or communist model, which highlighted the aspect of equality, and the capitalist model, which highlighted the aspect of liberty. And the equality aspect was imposed by communism, but in the very act of imposing it, they had to crush out liberty. So obviously one truth without the other complementing truth cannot exist. And so the equality became a farce, and communism in that form had to break. And yet the truth or principle of communism is valid because it's a universal and spiritual truth. Equally, we see in the capitalist system, there is the emphasis on individuality, but the individual, the emphasis on freedom, but the freedom given to you is really a freedom without equality. Some are more free than others, and the less free have to submit to the will of the more free, and a hierarchy of freedom is created, which immediately perverts the whole concept of freedom. And the result is therefore that you have thrown out the truth of equality, that we are all equally evolving souls, equally children of the same one divine, equally the same one self in so many different selves. That truth is forgotten, and instead you have a hierarchy of imposition, which means that the capitalist liberty becomes a farce and eventually breaks up. So the point being, neither liberty nor equality can coexist unless there is a third principle that links them together and joins them. And that third principle is fraternity. Fraternity, which is the sense of oneness. We are one family. We're all together. We are one really, but in different forms in some way. And when we have that, then we can be free and equal at the same time, as we are in a family. Especially in a loving family, you can be in exchange. A mother happily gives the last food to her child because, well, it's herself in another form. And she doesn't have to think twice, as you see among siblings and good friends or in any community. If the love is there, if the fraternity is there, then liberty and equality coexist. And now we suddenly realize these three words, well, they are exactly the motto of the French Revolution. And that's not by chance. In fact, this French Revolution was triggered by a spiritual ideal which tried to manifest on earth. It was caught by the French mind, which was at that time the most awake to receive these ideas. And in the very act of receiving them, of course, and executing them, it took on a certain distinctive and I would say limited form. It became more political and economic and social. The spiritual truth of it was lost. The spiritual truth is, as a soul, as the self is utterly free and unconditioned, because all space and time is its own manifestation. Nothing in space and time can limit it. That's the freedom of the self. And equality, each one of us being an expression of the same self, essentially, although a unique expression of the same self, well, we are all different and yet equal. And it is in our difference that we complement each other. And the fraternity, because we are one self. However different you wish to be, you're free to be that, and nothing can ever break you apart from the underlying reality that we are one self. The whole universe is one universe, and you are one with the universe. That's the ultimate fraternity that binds everything together. You can never escape the universe because you are the universe in their deepest poise. Of course, there are many, many layers in between, which allows for this appearance of separation and the play of separations and the play of hide and seek, which has its own joy. Why am I dwelling on these? Because these are the principles on which the future society is being built. And anything which goes contrary to these principles is actually coming across to break this evolutionary change. And in the pandemic, there are many efforts to try to suppress liberty, individuality, and to bring a kind of a fake equality by uniformity of suppression. We have to recognize what these are and correct for them consciously. Otherwise, we can easily fall prey to a kind of a propaganda. But more so within ourselves, as we are clear, within ourselves, as we develop this deeper truth or perceive it more and more and begin to live by it, we become focal points for the change. And that ripples out. And among our students, to speak of these things and to bring this deeper knowledge into their lives to help them. Another important point is to recognize that the nature of the transition into the spiritual age necessarily passes through a kind of a subjectivism. Because we have been through a period of an exaggerated materialism. And the materialism, well, it was taken to its maximum, where we were even told matter is all and there is no spirit. Or spirit and matter are separate and will always remain separate, etc. And that was all useful. It served a purpose. It helped us to ground ourselves in an exaggerated way in matter. But now, the greatest discoveries of science are showing us more and more that there is an underlying unity, that there is an underlying infinity behind all the appearances of finiteness. And there is non-locality. There is something which is everywhere at the same time as the same thing equally. And it all points to the spiritual truths. And so it's time that we just start speaking about it openly. Not only that as we recognize that we have to now learn to refer to it more and more, there is an automatic turning inward to a kind of a subjectivism. Unfortunately, this also has its positive and negative forms. You will see all over the world there is this turn into what is called postmodernism. What modernism promised was, by the power of the intellect, we will solve all problems. Science will solve all problems. The law, which is structured intellect, will solve all problems. It failed. Because intellect cannot solve all problems, because it is a power of finite pieces. Against every finite piece, you can show a bigger finite piece, against which this which was true so far becomes false. And if you think this is true, I'll show you a still bigger piece against which this becomes false. So there's no absolute truth. Equally, there's no absolute false. And suddenly, all those ideas fall apart. And you fall into a postmodernism where you say, there is no absolute truth, there is no absolute false, so I can do what I like. Unfortunately, that is a falsehood. There is such a thing as an absolute truth, but it does not belong in the domain of finite pieces. It belongs in the consciousness which embraces the whole universe. And we will live in it one day, and we will act from it one day. But for the moment, as long as we are in these pieces, our pieces have to turn towards their source. That's when they enter in relation with something greater, which is always true. And then we can manifest something which is always true, even though the forms may be transitory. And this is the truth that yoga teaches us. And so postmodernism caught a partial truth, but it concluded too hastily because it did not have the spiritual insight. But postmodernism is the trend today, and everybody will say, follow your bliss, follow your impulse, follow your desire, follow the moment, live in the now, and it doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. These are all erroneous formulations of a partial truth. And we have to consciously point to the greater truth, which is to which this was supposed to lead us. So Sri Aurobindo explains how in this movement towards a subjectivism, where there is no objective truth, now we have to find my subjective reality. If you stop short at the subjectivism of your sentiment, of your emotions, of your desires, or your mental constructions, you can get lost. And if each one does that, all you have in the collective is greater chaos and confusion. Something of which you're seeing today. Increasing chaos, increasing confusion. And it's happening because people are turning to this subjectivism, but without reference to something real, something lasting. You know, one of the ways how you know something is real, replace the word real by permanent. If it is permanent, it's closer to reality. If it is transient, it's closer to, well, unreal or falsehood. Very interesting reference, because that is eternal. Although as soon as it moves into form, the forms are transient, but it can fill any form and manifest through all forms equally. But we have to point, and especially when we speak to our students, point to this reality that there is a greater truth. And our life is meant to turn to that. And in every attempt, in every effort we make, an attempt to refer to that and express that, brings something of that into our life and fulfills our life, makes every day meaningful, makes every action more true, more real, more lasting, more satisfying, more joy-giving, more filled with harmony and love. And these are the things which make our life worthwhile. That kind of a postmodernism where everything is decomposed into an empty, hollow shell like the core of the onion is frustrating. People who live by those standards are fundamentally unhappy and always seeking but never finding, because they only catch the surface appearances and break it up and find nothing inside. Whereas the spiritual looks at the juice that fills, the delight, the soma of the Veda, which fills everything, and every experience of life has at least a drop of the soma inside it. And so when we begin to align to this deeper truth, we begin to find delight in everything. Even in a difficult situation where in appearance you will say, this is a problem, you look deeper behind the scenes to that which is the truth that it represents. And you say, this is a very interesting situation. And there's a delight. And perhaps a delight even in breaking that which is false, and a delight in building that which is more true, and so on. So these are pointers for our own lives individually, but also for those who we share with. And finally, in your own life, as you move to put into practice the ideals of the yoga tradition, lineage, teaching, whatever it is that you are most drawn to live and express, remember that all this is founded in something which is permanent, which is real, and therefore it's called dharma. Dharma meaning that which holds, which supports impermanence. It also supports from inside, because that which is contained, that which contains dharma is going to last. That which is hollow is going to break. So as you bring the aspect of dharma more and more into your life, you will find things will tend to flow into patterns of the spontaneity that is natural to the intuition and the divine consciousness. But dharma has three aspects, and we have to consciously cultivate and practice these three. First, it is knowledge. Second, it is power. And third is love. You'll see this correspond to the things we have said before. But this must be consciously cultivated in our life. We must always seek to know more deeply, more profoundly, more completely, more widely, more flexibly. Every time you find yourself thinking something against something else, know that you're wrong. Because in the divine knowledge, there's no against. Instead, look at the truth of that against which you are thinking and incorporate that into a larger, wider knowledge. And for that, you have to train your mind to become more flexible. And as your knowledge widens, you will grow in it. You will see there is nothing fundamentally contrary. But then comes the aspect of power. If what you know is not exercised and brought into life, then knowledge is important. The power to exercise and make may sometimes involve forceful action. There are people who say violence is bad. Yes, it is bad, but in a context. It is bad in thought. It is bad in emotion. It is wrong, rather. Let's not speak of good or bad. It is wrong in thought or in emotion. But on the physical domain, every action is violence. Even when you push, even if you sit, you're causing violence against the pillow on which you're sitting, right? If you eat, you're chewing something, there's violence. So violence is a principle of the psychological domain, not the physical domain. And so in your consciousness, you are clear with the knowledge and the clarity that knowledge brings. But in your actions, sometimes you have to exercise force and effectively and precisely as much as needed, not more, not less, to get the outcome that is required, which comes from the knowledge. But the knowledge and the force must have the third component, which is the love. Recognizing that on which you are acting is not other than you, but is yourself in a different form. When you play with a child, you never exercise your energy to a point that it will hurt the other child, isn't it? You may even withdraw your energy so that you can play with the child at his level of weakness or strength for the purpose of the play, because it's your child. And it is the same thing you will do with everything in the universe, because it is your own other part. And when this deeper love and compassion begin to flow, you will find that you will be able to exercise the knowledge and the power as necessary, when necessary, with the compassion necessary, even sometimes cutting to end a perversion, but with the love and compassion. And the cut you will experience as yourself, as if on yourself, and yet you will do it with that compassion and love. And so dharma has these three, let's say, legs on which it stands. And we have to grow and cultivate these things within ourselves, cultivate those four qualities, cultivate the soul powers that are within us. And as we begin to live it, it will radiate in our lives, and our students will be touched by something. They may not always be able to put a finger and say, this is what it is, but they'll feel something. And then the words you speak will transmit more than merely words. And that touches, that changes, that transforms. Each one of us must become a focal point of a transforming influence. And that's why we come back to that idea. You have the single most important responsibility in the world today. Because nobody else in the world has the technology to transform humanity or to divinize humanity or to accelerate human evolution. Because yoga is nothing but conscious, accelerated spiritual evolution. Since you have the technology to whatever extent, you have a responsibility that comes with it that you must exercise. And so I hope in the further discussions that you will have on all the other topics in the next 2 days, you keep this at the back of the mind. When you go back to your teaching responsibilities, you will maintain this at the back of the mind and consciously ask for help, because the divine wisdom and strength and love are not far away. They're right here, above you and within you. Ask for the help, ask for the knowledge, ask for the strength and the love, and instantly you will receive the help. You will be given what you need, even in the most contrary circumstances. Trust in that and call for help, and your life will be led and will be the most valuable thing in the universe. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Sraddhalu, for, I kind of feel it's like balm for the soul, but reminding us of our responsibility as yoga practitioners and teachers. And, you know, we see it very clearly where, you know, our classes have been either curtailed, stopped due to lockdown, or reduced in size. So yeah, to see maybe the context of the threat to people waking up and realizing their divinity, and yet the immense privilege we have to try to bring that across. So thank you for reminding us of those. I think it's really important to yeah, to support each other in that process as well. So if anybody would like to ask any questions, now would be a really good time to put them into the Q&A box. I actually thought it was very interesting last night. I remembered, Sraddhalu, that you came to Ireland in 2018, and the topic, if I remember correctly, was yoga in a world of transition. Mm-hmm. And we looked at the responsibility of the yoga teacher in this transition. And little did we know it was going to transition so quickly and so radically at the time. Yeah, a lot of people are expressing their gratitude, saying thank you for the words. They've very much touched and inspired. And I think maybe your message today, if we can keep in mind the 3 points that you said, the knowledge, the power, the love, and if I am not overstepping my mark, we see those in the Jnana Yoga and the Karma Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga. But I think if we can keep those in the forefront of our minds and our practice and in our teaching, that maybe we will be making or having a more conscious effect on this during this time. do you want to maybe share with people maybe how they can approach those three concepts in their
Yes.
practice, in their lives, maybe?
Yes. So we can first of all recognize that what we are as a power of intellect has been in evolution perhaps the most important so far, but it has reached its limit of sufficiency. And the whole movement of evolution is taking you from mind to that which is greater than mind. And the immediate next step is that domain that we call intuition, where the knowledge is already there and the intellect is only a vehicle of intuition. You know, in the Kena Upanishad, there's this very fascinating question which is put. What is it that leads the mind to its mark? What is it that is the life of our life energies and gives them life force? What is it that is the sight behind our seeing? And actually, these are real questions which are problems of biology, of artificial intelligence, and philosophy equally. So, for example, in artificial intelligence, there is what they call the hard problem because it's hard. You don't have a solution for it. So the machine can have a camera, it can have an analysis, and it can produce a certain output. But where is the seeing taking place? You still don't have a seeing experience in the machine. Who is the seer who sees in us, which we are unable to replicate in the machine? And so it points to a power, a faculty of seeing, which is more than our physical sight or our mental seeing. It is in that seeing that the true seeing is taking place. And the Kena points to you to go from this to that seeing. I'll give a simple example. When you have a brilliant idea, say, yes, I've got it. What was that which just happened where you got it? Briefly, like a flash, something came into you and you went, aha. What was the knowledge that came that gave you the illumination? It's like a seeing of a kind, but it came from somewhere. You only caught what came after it came into you. But it came from somewhere into your mind. And so can this part of the mind now turn to the source from which it came? And so the first training for that, which is also a training common to Dhyana Yoga and even Karma and Bhakti to some extent, but not so much, is train your mind to become silent. Because as long as your mind is active and agitated, it is unable to perceive that from which the true insight comes. I'm going to give another example. Let's say you're given a problem, and a very complex problem. Like if you were in school and you had a maths problem or a technical geometrical problem or something. And you're trying to figure it out. You're trying out this or that. And someone asks, well, where are you? And you say, I'm very close to the answer, but I have not yet got it. How much time do you need? A few more minutes. Wait. Now remember, you don't know the solution. And yet you know you're close to the solution. How is that possible? You can even give an estimate of the time. You can say, it is so many more minutes that you need. How is that possible? Because somewhere within you, you already know the solution, but it is not here in the intellect, but it is in that seeing part. There you know it. And the intellect is only being led by that, like a pointer, like a laser pointer. It says, look here, and you go there. It says, look there, and you go here. And you can see, you can feel you're close to it. That's how the intellect works. Let me give you another example. If I ask you to remember right now, do you remember the most interesting experience you had on the beach? Think about it. In a moment, you have a flash of a memory. Did you think up all the experiences of all the beaches of all of your life and then sift through and see, is this more important? Is that more important? When you do a search on Google, you type a keyword search. It has to sift through all the data that it has to find that which is most relevant. Your mind doesn't have to do that. Your mind only turns in okay, which is most important, and pop, something comes out. Interesting. It came out, and maybe two things came out and you picked one of them. But both things came out from somewhere inside where all the memories are stored. But you didn't have to search all the memories. And here's the more interesting part. From that, where it came out, that thing knew what you were looking for. So the fascinating insight you gain is that there is within you a greater intelligence that knows what you're looking for. And when you turn to listen to it, it pops out to you what you need. Here's your most powerful tool for greater knowledge. Recognize that there is already within you this greater intelligence, a super mind, so to say, or an intuitive mind. And when you turn to it with a specific question or need, it can give you what you need. Only problem is you need to be receptive. If you start thinking, oh, will it be this, will it be that, will it be that, even when it gives you a suggestion, you miss it because you're too busy. So you have to become completely silent so that the ray that comes from there reflects in your mind. So this is the classic symbol given in the yoga tradition. Your mind must become like a silent, still silent lake surface in which the sun will reflect perfectly. It's a very powerful symbol because the sun represents the source of all knowledge, etc. But that's how you begin training in this aspect of the training of mind. And if you can train your mind to become silent and remain silent at will for as long as you need, you have made the first point of success. There's a second step of practice, and that is you consciously wait before you start an activity. You have to speak, you have to write, you have to do some work. Maybe you're going to prepare food. Maybe you're going to start walking. You wait. Center yourself, make your mind silent now, and then turn to the source within or above. And wait for it to initiate the action. That's the training given, by the way, to the Olympic gymnasts. If you start doing the gymnastics, you will fail for sure. If you wait for it to do through you, you will succeed for sure. That's the technique for entering the zone. So first step, become totally silent. Only when you can do this, the second step becomes possible. You turn to that and wait, and then it starts. And it flows, or rather you flow with it, or it carries you, and the thing is done. So do these for very specific activities, simple activities when you're writing, where you need some inspiration. Eventually extend it to all activities. And in this part, you'll find it also joins with the particular practices of Karma Yoga. There'll be a third step also in this training of the intuition, which will be shifting the center of thought from somewhere here to the top of the head. To think more and more, not inside the head, but shift that center more and more to the top of the head and think from here. And it will, first thing it will do, it will free your mind from the dullness that the physical brain brings. And you'll find even when your body is tired, when your body is clouded and mixed, you can shift your center here and be in a state of clarity and receive the intuition more easily, because this is the center closer to the center of intuition. There'll be a fourth step, which is more complex. We don't need to go into that. But if you can work on these three, that will be one important practice. Next, we will combine this with the aspect of karma and bhakti. So in the karma, of course, you know the way the traditional practice starts by consecrating first the results of your work. And a simple way you can do this, every day you start your day by centering yourself, making your mind silent, making your emotions silent to whatever extent. Remember the divine or feel the divine presence, either within you or above you or around you, whichever way is easier for you. And then look at the day ahead. Here are all the things which I have to do. Hold the intention that you want to do these things in attunement to the divine presence, or invoke the divine presence, knowledge, power, love, to fill all this activity. And then let yourself begin. If you can combine it with the other practice of waiting for the inspiration to begin, perfect. And then after that, in the flow of the day, you'll forget, no problem. At the end of the day, again, you will make the same consecration. You sit down, center yourself, and everything that you have done, you gather as if with an intention and offer it to the divine. Here, all this I have done and I give to you. It's not mine. You'll see in the Vedic ritual, repeatedly they will say Swaha to the divine, that is offered to the divine, this is not mine. So you complete your day with that movement. Now when you start doing this every day, beginning and end, you'll find the influence will begin to percolate, permeate, and fill the whole day. And at that point, suddenly in the middle of the day, you'll remember, oh yeah, this is what I had done in the morning. And the moment you remember spontaneously, you pause, recall that, bring back that feeling, however partially, and then continue the activity. And increasingly, more and more frequently, it will begin to happen. You can, of course, encourage it to happen more frequently also. And in this way, more and more, the sense of consecration, the sense of offering of the effort or the results of the effort first will begin. Later, it will turn into the offering of the effort itself, and eventually it becomes an offering of oneself. But that's broadly the direction in which one begins. And both of these you will find are complementary and lead you to the jnana and the karma aspect are complementary and lead you towards the bhakti aspect. With both these practices, the sense of closeness and intimacy with the divine presence will grow. Through knowledge, you will begin to perceive, oh my God, this is such an extraordinary wisdom and skill in the whole working of the world. You'll begin to feel it and perceive it in the way things happen. In your own life, you will see, in the morning, I thought I would do X, Y, Z. And because I decided to do it, the X calls me, Y messages me, and Z meets me, and the work is done. I just put that intention to do it, and somehow it begins to happen more easily. And you'll feel and experience the vividness and the reality of the divine help filling you, working through circumstances. And with it will grow the sense of gratitude and the joy of self-giving, and the joy and the love of that movement will grow. And the bhakti begins to fill very quickly into both the knowledge and the works. Now, for some of us, the bhakti is our starting point. For some of us, the works are the starting point. For some, the knowledge. But whatever your starting point, you'll find all three being complementary to each other. Eventually, consciously, these three have to merge into a single movement. So this would be a very practical way to begin. And it's enough even as a beginning to lead you to a living communion with the reality of the divine help. And with it, the intuitive power will grow enormously, and the sense of or the state of flow will begin to happen more frequently. And the love and gratitude will make everything full of joy and so deeply satisfying.
I think that was very practical and very, very helpful. Sraddhalu, thank you very, very much. And especially to see how one leads to the other, how they are not separate in themselves, that, you know, they work together. And another example of that oneness within and without.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has any more questions, see, we have just gone over time, but I'm very happy if anybody wants to ask Sraddhalu anything specific. Or Sraddhalu, maybe you want to close with a few tips to keep in mind, thoughts to keep in mind. And may I just say thank you very, very much for participating and for sharing your knowledge and your time. It was really very, very beneficial.
And I thank you for bringing such wonderful people together. You're the, so to say, the soul that gathers all the wonderful people. Mm-hmm. I'd like to close with an observation. It's a general observation about the current situation. And I'm seeing not just the pandemic, because that's a little blip in a larger context. And this is the overall situation of human evolution has taken us through many stages, through many cycles, and we're familiar with the 4 yugas and so on. It's brought us to a point where the mass of humanity is largely ready to awaken to a higher possibility. It is in evolutionary terms a similar situation to what happened when in the ape consciousness there was sufficient maturity to prepare it to turn to the power of the human intellect. And such a leap, a similar radical leap, is preparing in humanity from the intellect to a supra mental consciousness, of which the intuition is the first glimpse that we have of it, this access to all knowledge. And this is happening whether we like it or not. It's part of the whole push of evolution. And in nature, and nature is a conscious power. You know, she's not just a machine, she's a conscious power. In nature, there's an intention to push this forward and make a great leap in evolution. And that's the reason why you'll see in the last 100 years a series of extraordinary discoveries and changes and seething of ideas and hopes and possibilities and churning like never before. Radical shifts in society and values and economic structures and systems breaking down, as well as attempts to build new systems and structures. We are moving from a top-heavy hierarchical system to a more peer-level organized humanity. That's one of the transitions that the internet represents, in fact. Somehow nobody can control you anymore once you're at the level of that peer-level network. So there's this very interesting transition taking place. It is, in terms of human evolution, the single most interesting period of human history. And remember, all of us have been through all those times, from the period times of Atlantis, of which some memory is there, and even earlier, of which no memory is left. We've been through many cycles of civilizational change. But all of those have brought us to this, which is the single most filled with potential, important, because it represents the most radical leap, the likes of which has never happened before and will never happen after. And so that's the reason why all the souls are thrilled to be here at present, to be in body at present, and to make the most of this opportunity. Except at the time when you took birth, you know, kind of fell into this little brain and body and dulled yourself to the point of almost forgetfulness. And then your social upbringing and all those things gave you all kinds of confusing inputs, so you forgot why you came. And yet, because the memory is there deep within, it guides in spite of it. And all of us will have fascinating stories of how we woke to yoga and to the deeper spiritual possibilities. But recognize that you chose to be here at this time because of the opportunity it offers. And if you put this in the context of all the lives before, having brought you to this, and for your soul's choice to be here at this moment being the single most important thing, you will know how important this life is. You will know how important every single day is. Remind yourself every day of this truth. Because this opportunity won't come again. Once we make this transition, well, it won't be as exciting, as fascinating. People will look back at this historic passage and they'll say, wow, that was such an exciting time. From a spiritual potential perspective, at least, and even of course, social, economic, and technological and other perspectives. So remind yourself of this, and in it is implied your sense of purpose, that you took birth for something important. Just that idea at the beginning of the day is enough to give a reference for all else that you do. And if you can remind yourself of this truth every day, everything you do in the day, you will begin to refer in terms of its value for this. And you'll notice something very interesting. Automatically, certain things will be more important, some other things will be less important. And they'll just fall into place. They'll all get prioritized on their own. So this is the kind of a last guideline that I wanted to close with. that we are not here by chance. We are not meeting here by chance. We are also connected on a deeper level because we have been. Why are you in yoga? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You've had many lives where you have dedicated to the practice of yoga. Just because you don't remember here doesn't matter. Inside, in that deeper knowledge, all the memory is there. And all the benefit of that is there. And that's why we're here together, not by chance. And so as a spiritual community that we are, although in a virtual space in our current meeting, we're still connected in spirit and in sense of purpose. You are not alone, we are all together. And above all, there's the divine presence leading and guiding us. Remember this and call for its help. I think we'll close with this. Namaste. Perhaps we can close with 10 seconds of concentration in gratitude to the divine presence. And if you like, you can chant with me Om together 3 times. Om.
Thank you very much, Sraddhalu. And thank you everybody for your participation.
Until next year. We'll meet physically next year.
In person, and we can show the steps, the leaps we've taken in our evolution as well. We can all share them together next year.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to log off now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.